Chapter 12, you have to find enjoyment in other ways. One of the challenging things, and this is true broadly of venturing, where you're trading off the existing known way of doing things, how you understand the world, and investing in something that's arbitrary, um, or not arbitrary, sorry, ambiguous, and investing in this thing, you don't necessarily know what the outcomes are, and you don't know what the alternatives will provide. Um, when you do this, you will experience a great deal of failure, and you'll be measuring yourself against the existing norm. If you were to take just basic statistics, if you were to look at almost all actions, almost all actions result in roughly somewhere around 90 to 95% of failure. Where every time you try something, you will result predominantly in failure. If you are getting to 80% of the time of failure, uh, you're doing okay, right? So you're only getting a fraction of the results that you would expect. So if you're to frame this on the positive side, success would happen maybe 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20 times. Because of this, most of your world is almost always in the negative. And it almost always feels like you don't know what you're doing. It almost always feels like you are you're behind, that uh, that there is no right answer action that you can take. And that's because, statistically, if you look at it, your results are always going to be pretty poor. So what do? You have to find enjoyment in things that people wouldn't normally expect where there's enjoyment. On one side, you could look at implicit rewards, right? Or rewards that are not quite as explicit that people would acknowledge, right? Explicit rewards are rewards that are typical that you would think about, things like money, things like a concrete recognition, a badge, any of those number of different things. But you're not going to get those for almost all of your actions. In fact, it would probably be particularly strange if you were to get those kinds of rewards for everything that you choose. It would seem like you're overtly, um, there's too many metrics, right? And I think that's a lot of where a lot of society is going to today, is we're metrifying everything. There's metrics for everything. And we know that that is not necessarily always a positive result, right? We know that there is a lot that is tied to, other things like social comparison or feeling poorly about yourself, all these kind of things. So instead, you have to tie yourself to things that are not necessarily as explicit and things that people normally discount. Doing things because you just find it passionate, or um, because you find it enjoyable, right? There is no real way that we can measure that. We could do a survey and sort of survey us in terms of our feelings of enjoyment or happiness, but that's not really capturing the whole thing. It only kind of captures part of it. And so we have to be used to getting into these things that don't necessarily can be measured, things that are really, really squishy that people would normally discount. I'm, um, I'm an engineer by training. Pseudo-economists have probably taken a lot more economics courses than most economists and read a lot more about economics. But at the end of the day, many of the things that give us pleasure have no explicit rewards to it. there's really not a lot that we can put our fingers on that are very difficult and very challenging, right? One side of it, in terms of having a family, for example, I've given this example a fair bit in this idea of venturing. Now, on one side of it, we are tied, right? There are legal obligations. We can't abandon kids anymore, right? And people used to do that. That was a thing. That's why we have laws, because people would abandon kids when things got really difficult. Now, um, but today, if we tie to it and we invest, right, and it requires a lot of conscious effort. It's not something that just comes really easy. It requires a lot of conscious effort. All of this requires a tremendous amount of effort of maintaining and investing. But if you invest and continue to maintain good, strong relationships, whatever that means, but I think you know what that means. It's making sure that you are there for somebody and sacrificing a little bit of your time and effort to be around to be helpful for other people. So with that, if you know that that is an important part of it, these very fuzzy things, and you make that investment, that's the key thing, is that you are actually engaging in making that investment. Lots of people will not. The vast majority of the people are not going to want to invest. But if you do those things, you get a lot of rewards from it. And they're implicit. You can't put your finger on it. Right? So for example, if you have a family or you get an education, there is a lot of it that is sacrifice. And a lot of it is very challenging, right? Like getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning when your kid is throwing up and sitting with them and then knowing that you have to go to work the next day, um, when you don't feel like it and you're on a few hours of sleep and you're going in and doing this, it's a lot of sacrifice and it sucks. In some ways it's dangerous too, right? Like there is a lot of exposure to risk by doing that. But you do those things not for the pleasure at the moment, not for the rewards at the moment, because there is no rewards. It's because you're trying to raise good human beings that hopefully when 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 you're older, um, that there's something more there. And I can't even say like, hey, they're gonna come back and visit you. No, they might be when they're 18 years old, they might go and have some sort of epiphany and never want to be around you if you're venturing. And that's a normal part of life. Like all of this stuff is very normal to have these experiences of where you have a great relationship and all of a sudden, um, when when you had a great relationship for 16 years and the last two were miserable and somebody goes and leaves, well, you have to be okay with that and know that you actually put in the investment to raise a good human being, and you have to hope. And that's like, this is squishy. All of this is squishy. All of it is like, you can never be able to put your fingers on any of this stuff, but you can hope that they end up having a good life and that you had something to do with that. And that's all you can do. It's all squishy. If you were to expect a explicit reward, it makes absolutely no sense, right? Like you invest your time and effort to raising, um, good adults. That's essentially what you're doing. That they are going to come back and pay you and give you money or, say add a boy or add a girl or whatever. Like that makes no sense as a parent. So we know that makes no sense, right? That's kind of dumb. Um, like it's kind of dumb. Like if you think about it, and I know I that's a pejorative word, but it's just silly to acknowledge it that that is going to happen. So the only thing that you could do is love the fact that you're actually doing it at the moment. Love the fact that you're doing the actions. And there's no explicit rewards with any of it. It's not going to happen. And so you have to be okay with doing what you deem as the right thing at the moment. And that's the key thing, is knowing what is the right thing and having that intuition of what is the right thing is miserably hard, right? Some people are going to say it's one thing, and then other people it's going to say it's another thing. And we don't know. We make a lot of mistakes as human beings. Even experts make mistakes with that stuff all the time. But the only thing that you can do is to do your best and continuously keep trying to invest and keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. And that is venturing, right? It's the same as getting an education. It's foolhardy. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to think that you should be only worried about the salary of the education that you're getting. I went through this conversation with my kids last night, that on one side, most people don't worry about the salary that they get, and the cost is associated with education. They don't think about it. They don't think about some education is going to cost you $200, $300, $400,000, and it's going to take you 30 years to pay back. Right now, I want people to think about that and being very explicit. But on the other side is that you also have to have that element of choosing things, and you just, even if this is the tricky part, even if you do that and you make that large investment and it does not work out, you decide to stay at home, you decide to go and do something to help out the poor, and you have this large debt, that you did the right thing, that it seems like at the time that this was the right thing for me. And that's an impossible decision. And there's always going to be regret when you do those things. It's just natural to feel the pain of making a large investment. But that's the bet. That's the uncertainty. That's the challenge that you're facing. You never quite know. And nor should you, because the world is so incredibly complex with so many interacting relationships that you'll never be able to see it. And that's the thing to understand, is that no matter what, the investment that you make, and maybe it's an entrepreneurial venture, right? You're building a business. You don't know if that investment's going to pan out. And if you make that investment and you actually do the effort, where you trade off the pain of today, or you have pain today, trade off pleasure today, or something in the future that you have no idea what it actually means, and you try to do your best and you invest and you do all of the things that people tell you to actually do, or you learn and you pick the right mission, you do all of those things that you hear about, and it still doesn't work out, that you know that you did the right thing and that you get pleasure, you get the rewards from something else, something that is unexplainable. And the rewards might even be the fact that you're doing that sacrifice. The rewards might actually be coming from the pain itself. Or so one of the reasons why I've exercised my whole life. I swim, and sometimes in my practices right now, as my exercise have changed many times, different things. But the exercise of choice that I have right now is swimming. And almost every day when I'm swimming, I will spend 15, 20 minutes of extraordinarily rigorous exercise, right? Like at 100% of my effort. And I'm super winded. I can't breathe. I feel like I'm drowning. And it's miserable. It hurts. Everything about it hurts. But that is the reward for me. It's that pain that I feel. There's nothing about it that would be considered pleasurable in terms of how people think about it. And it's same as any other thing that people do like that. It's the pain that you feel that is the important part, that the pleasure comes from. And it's this weird duality where pain and pleasure are the same thing. And I want you to really think about that as you go about adventuring, is think about all of the ways that you can get rewards in different ways that are not explicit. People are never going to tell you. If you become the best person to knit, nobody's ever going to tell you, like, oh man, you're a really good knitter. You get good at building Legos. And that's your thing. That's your exercise that you're doing. And you're really good at it. Nobody's ever going to come and say, hey, you are the best Lego builder ever. So you need to find those things that are not explicit, that there is a tremendous amount of pleasure that you get from, and it's going to be different for everybody. And it's challenging to find those things. That's what makes it very, very difficult. Is first of all, we can't measure it. And in business school, we like to measure everything. But many things are unmeasurable and they shouldn't be measured. And then on the other side is that it's different for everybody and that there is what's called a lot of heterogeneity amongst what we actually feel and experience. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.